All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. It's 2 minutes after the hour. My name is Joe Sordi. I am the CEO of Strategic Security Corp. And we are prepared to give a brief statement surrounding the incidents regarding the suspension of services at the Fulton County Jail. We will not be taking any questions during this statement, so please hold all questions until after the statement is complete. Once again, my name is Joe Sordi, S-O-R-D-I, and the Chief Executive Officer of the Strategic Security Corp. This contract has started on or about July 1st, 2023, to provide security guard supplemental services to the Fulton County Jail. That's approximately 80 security guards. It initially started at 40 and has ramped up to 80 to provide supplemental duties to the deputies performing the jail services. These are non-direct contact services with the inmates. These are ancillary services such as doorways, entrances, and exits. Immediately in the contract negotiations, the Fulton County Jail requested that we pull back a clause regarding non-solicitation of our employees. Typically, we have that in every type of contract. Every security provider does, whereas a company cannot solicit for direct hire your employees. It was conveyed to us that they wish to remove that part of the agreement so that if a security guard wanted to elevate his career and become a sheriff's deputy, he could. So barring that exclusion, we acquiesced and we were amendable to removing that clause so that there could be an advancement of one's career into a deputy public sector position, which obviously would pay more and there's greater longevity. So barring that, there is nothing that we would agree to as far as a solicitation clause. Almost immediately, the Fulton County Sheriff's Office fell behind in payments in excess of 90 days. And despite non-payment, we continued to pay all of our employees and have payroll records to prove that all of our employees were paid weekly for the past year while we were waiting for payment from Fulton County Jail. We have in excess of 75 to 100 documented phone calls and emails to representatives of the Fulton County Jail, the mayor's office, the governor's office, the board of commissioners, requesting payment for said services. Negotiations and deadlines for the suspension of services began way back in February of 2024, when it was apparent that the county jail was not able to fulfill its end of the agreement and pay for services. Being a former law enforcement officer and a public servant, it was with a heavy heart that we had to set a deadline for a drop-dead date if we were to pull out of this contract. We gave them till March 28th to provide an answer if they're able to come up, I'm sorry, not March 28th, August 28th, to provide an answer if they're able to come up with funding for the project. We had several communications to them throughout the course of the day. The deadlines came and passed. Then on March 28th, as it was looming, the definitive deadline, the drop dead date where we were going to suspend services, we finally got communication back and engaged in communication with the Fulton County Jail. Subsequently, we sent over a revised addendum to an agreement with terms outlining conditions for payment of services and subsequent terms to ensure that all parties are fairly represented. The contract deadline for that came and went, and we placed several more calls to representatives of the jail, including the sheriff. They all fell on deaf ears. We did not get a response. After we did not get a response, we were then forced to notify our staff that we are suspending services effective immediately of the drop dead date that we provided to the county. And we would no longer be providing any subsequent services to the jail. It is with a heavy heart that we do this, because we understand that it puts inmates at risk, it puts sheriff's deputies at risk, it puts a whole host of people at risk, including the local constituents of Fulton County. And it results in jail being shut down, as well as our employees that are reliant upon these jobs to have steady employment. We are actively pursuing all measures to re-engage Fulton County should they decide they want to continue services. We are always open for that. We are also taking all of our employees and looking to move them to other contracts that we have throughout the state. Sheriff Labatt's statement that he is looking to hire our employees directly demonstrates that upon entering the contract, the agreement was entered in bad faith. If you're looking to solicit our employees, and if you never had the funds to actually pay for said services being rendered. Back in February or March of last year, we were told that there was a cyber attack, and that was the delay in payment. We were provided with no said proof. Furthermore, it just compounded day after day, week after week. And the only reason why we haven't pulled out until now is because of our moral obligation to the officers and the men and women in blue that we stood side by side with in the jail, and wanted to provide the safest environment for those in our care and custody, and to supplement the deputies as well. But we can no longer continue to support the project and pay our officers. So we are paying our officers through the end date, and we have suspended services until a new agreement could be made. The sheriff's statement that he is looking to hire our employees directly, to our knowledge, that means that they are not being given peace officer status. If they are not given peace officer status, they are then governed to have a security license issued by the Georgia Board of Private Detectives and Agencies. If they're not given peace officer status, they do not fall under the color of law exception, which means if there is some sort of liability or act taken, that they are outside the scope of their employment, as they are not licensed. If their title is basically the same as it was with us, security, then they need to be licensed, and the Fulton County Jail itself needs to be licensed as a security agency or a private detective agency, which it is not. It is licensed as a law enforcement entity. So this raises several questions for us as far as if they're violating OCGA codes and laws. And if they do hire our personnel and they weren't able to pay us or remit payment for invoices and services rendered to the tune of in excess of $1 million, where are they going to come up with paying these employees on a weekly basis? They explained to us that they were taking from various buckets of money to give us small amounts to help us get through the next week or two. However, if those small buckets are depleted, and this is a minimal drop in the bucket because we offered them that we would stay on past the drop dead date if they were providing approximately about $175,000 of 2-week service and of back money owed, and execute the agreement. If they were not, then we were pulling services. So if they did not even have that small nominal amount, how are they going to pay these officers to work at the jail? So once again, this is not something that we're proud of. In 22 years of private security and public sector service, we have never had to suspend services to any client due to non-payment of services. At this time, we'll open it up and take any questions.
This is Erica Murphy here with 11 Alive News. You said that this is the first time in 22 years that your company has ever had to deal with something like this. I'm wondering, what are you hearing from the people that are there on the ground floor? Have your employees said that they will go ahead and sign on with the sheriff, or are they going to stay on with your company?
I assume that's going to be on a case-by-case basis. We are offering employees other positions that they could transfer to. If they elect to stay on with the sheriff, then that's their prerogative, however they want to. I understand the sheriff's offer of enticing these employees by giving them a 10% raise. I understand that that is something that's appealing to them, but you have to ask the question, if I was any one of these employees, if the company I work for was not getting paid, how am I going to get paid in the long term?
And can you remind us how much you're owed?
We're owed in excess of $1 million.
This is Dylan Jackson with Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Could you clarify, you said that the disputes began happening in February, but this outstanding bill was for the last 3 months. Were they paying you at some point between February and June, and then weren't paying you from June to August, or how did that work out?
Great question. The contract began in July of 23. Immediately upon July of 23, we noticed a deficiency in our contract and in our period where it talks about our compensation, where if a client defaults past 2 billing cycles, we're able to suspend services. Due to the nature of the contract, we did not exercise that. We tried to engage them repeatedly. They made small payments to just keep us at bay. They never came fully 100% around to pay the entire principal due. They would pay small little percentages of it, and we would, because we wanted to maintain the relationship, we would continue to work with the county, hoping that there would be an amicable resolution for everyone. But as it turns out, given the sheriff's attempt to hire our folks individually and to not be forthcoming, and to basically be forthcoming in his interview yesterday that they simply did not have the money, that is basically saying that he knowingly and willingly entered into an agreement with no intentions of paying.
And just to clarify,
thus a bad faith agreement.
Just to clarify, so it's fair to say that they've never paid, since July 2023 when the contract was entered, they've never paid the full amount per billing cycle. They've basically been paying little by little, and then the past 3 months they had not been paying at all. Is that fair to characterize it that way?
They've been playing catch up on older invoices due, and never have been able to pay the entire principal due. And for the last several months, since February of 2024, have been severely delinquent.
Well, how much have they paid you?
That's confidential to this point. They have, as I said, they have paid a small amount of money, but they have not paid the principal that is due, which is over $1 million.
From a jail security standpoint, can you elaborate on what positions these security officers?
I'll mute mine.
I just muted mine. So from a jail security standpoint, can you elaborate on what positions these security officers were filling? And from your perspective, what aspects of the jail may now be vulnerable?
Well, I'm not going to go into detail about what aspects of the jail could be vulnerable, because we did work shoulder to shoulder with the sheriff's deputies, and we have developed a relationship with them. So we're not, for any amount of money, going to compromise our ethics or our moral obligation to them and divulge any operational security reasons that would compromise the security of the jail. All I would tell you is that we were manning and doing positions that were non-direct contact positions with the inmates. So those were exterior positions, towers, doorways, entrances, things of that nature. I cannot go into further detail because that would jeopardize the overall operational security of the jail, and I do not want to put the men and women that work there at risk.
Could you tell
Can
me
you repeat
about next
one
steps
part
here?
about-
I'm sorry, ma'am?
Courtney, were you talking?
Yeah, I was just gonna have him repeat something, so you go ahead.
What I was going to ask about is next steps here. So they owe you over $1 million. What steps are you planning to take to get your money, or are you planning to take any steps?
Well, at this point, we're hoping to re-engage them, and being that they cannot legally do what they're looking to do in terms of hiring security guards because they're not giving them peace officer status. So that's something that I'm sure post this conference that the Georgia Board of Investigations will look into, and the private detective agency and security board will look into. We are exploring any method possible at this point to secure payment for services rendered. We did provide a service. It was bona fide. We paid our employees for said service, and we'd like to collect what is owed to the company. It's that simple. It's there's nothing more to it than that.
So when you say explore any method possible, does that mean up into and including taking them to court?
Unfortunately, we hope it does not come to that, but as we said, we are open to any action at this point that would remedy this situation.
Sorry, can you just repeat for us about this, who this affects, and the safety aspect that you were talking about in the beginning?
Well, this affects not only the men and women and the deputies that work at the jail, because now they have to work overtime, they have to work longer hours, they get fatigued, they're probably canceling their days off, they have to lock down the jail, which means services and liberties given to those in their care and custody cannot be exercised, and obviously affects the intake of other inmates coming in or those that have to be in their care and custody, which then will ultimately, as any law enforcement person will know, what happens on the inside of a jail generally spills over onto the outside of a jail, which would be the county streets.
Has the sheriff re-engaged with you since he made his comments last night? Are you guys talking again?
Not one member of the Fulton County Sheriff's Office or the Mayor's Office has contacted us post the sheriff's press release.
Last week, a few of your security officers were arrested in an investigation regarding the Fulton Sheriff's Office. Is there any connection between those arrests and the dispute that you and the sheriff have had for the last few months?
It is not a dispute. The sheriff has praised and given us accolades, and even in his press release last night, said that he wants to get us paid and give us accolades for the job that we have done. As far as your first question regarding any synergy or connection there, no, there has not. Unfortunately, that was bad actors that have went through a thorough background and screening process, which includes a psychological test, a drug analysis test, a criminal history test, a credit test, a reference test, a education and experience check. And these things, unfortunately, are the things that we can measure and check when we're hiring somebody. We cannot measure and check what's in somebody's mindset when they look to do something. And with any bad actors, we fully cooperate with law enforcement so that they can be brought to justice, just as the sheriff does when his deputies, as they were just recently, involved in an altercation at the jail.
And just one more thing, is it fair to say that I spoke to the county manager's office, and they said that, they had originally budgeted much less than what the contract turned out to be, or the projected expenditures. I think it was around 1 million when they were talking with the sheriff during the budget process earlier this year, and it grew to about 4 million. Is that an accurate representation of, I guess, the increased reliance of the sheriff's office on your services? And if so, does that reflect an increase in the amount of guards you provided to the sheriff's office? What did that increase of money over the course of your engagement mean?
Most of the increase in money is relative to the increase in services provided at the jail. Historically, and this is not the sheriff's office alone, throughout the United States, we're in a current state of depolicing. Law enforcement agencies, coast to coast, are suffering shortages in retention and in hiring new employees to the tune of anywhere between 40 up to 60%. And those, actually, the FBI even wrote an opinion piece on this matter. And it is this piece that basically has affected Fulton County as well. And that's why they then outsourced services that were predominantly the services of sworn deputies to perform. They outsourced to us to come in and supplement these law enforcement duties, as we do at various other entities throughout the United States for local, state, and federal municipalities.
Yeah, are you providing security services at any other jails in Georgia?
I cannot comment where we are providing services in the state of Georgia or throughout any other state for operational security reasons and contractual confidentiality reasons.
Can you tell me what role the recent arrests of your employees have had in you coming out publicly about this disagreement over money with the jail?
It has no effect in us coming out publicly over this disagreement with the, basically at the end of the day, we offered right up until the deadline a option for the Fulton County Jail to keep to continuity of services. And they just acquiesced and did not want to engage us at all regarding this. We offered them solutions. We offered them deadlines. When deadlines passed, we moved deadlines. We extended deadlines. We then gave them a drop-dead final deadline. And I even personally called the sheriff and the other sheriff and got no response when the deadline loomed. And that was the last we heard. So we with no response and no explanation about when any type of funding would be provided, we were forced to suspend services.
Could you also share with me what kind of background checks do you administer to people that you hire in to be these security guards?
We hire folks and administer background checks in accordance with the Georgia Board of Private Detective and Agencies. And that's a criminal history check. That's your standard criminal history check. That is a drug screening test and various other methods that I explained before that we do to ensure that we're getting the most competent applicants to put forth to the jail. From that, the jail then takes and interviews those people and puts them into a screening process and goes one step further and conducts their own background check and has them do their own training, where in addition to the training we are providing them, the jail then provides their own training to them that they must attend. So not only do they have to pass our screening methods, but they also have to pass the jail screening methods and background check and training. I got time for 2 more questions.
I have a question from WSB. So you said the contract started in July. They immediately didn't pay. February rolls around. Deadlines start happening. When was the last time you talked to them? What month? So we can add that in there.
We talked to the jail just as soon as yesterday. We were on the phone with jail right before, several hours before Sheriff Lavat's press conference.
Did he ever tell you why there was no payments or anything?
His explanation, well, his explanation and his staff's explanation when it initially first started was the check was in the mail, then it was a wire transfer. Obviously, there was no wire transfer, there was no check in the mail. Then it was a cyber attack. There was no proof or given to us that they had suffered a cyber attack and that delayed their payment systems. Then it was just a whole nother series of events and incidents and excuses why we never received payment for services rendered. As far as yesterday, that was the first time in several months after reaching out to the sheriff that he finally did contact me back. And we spoke, and his answer was that we simply just don't have the money, that the money is earmarked, but the money is held up by the Board of Commissioners and not being released. And that he is trying to allocate funds and move things around from his internal jail operations and budgets to get us paid, but that amount would not even cover one invoice.
Will you be providing those any of those documents on the invoices and the ones that you mentioned earlier? Would you be providing those?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? I didn't catch that.
Yeah, you said you had, extensive documentation of unpaid invoices and communication, things like that. Will you be providing those?
I'm sure at some point in time that they will come to light and surface, and that will be dictated by the course of events that the county takes to remit payment and our response to those events.
And just to be crystal clear, you entered in the contract in July of last year. Since you entered in the contract, they had underpaid you, and then in February they stopped paying you. So it's accurate to say they had never, in the course of the contract since July of last year, fully paid for the services your company has provided.
That is correct. Okay, folks, thank you very much for your time. If there's anything else that comes to light, or if the county wishes to re-engage us, we are always open to that. And as I said, this is with a heavy heart that unfortunately we have to do this. But we are suspending services, and we told those guards that should this situation be rectified, that we would love to put them back to work, even if they're working at a current location for us, or they're working at another provider, and bring them back over and employ them again in this capacity, if they elect to. As I said, this is something that in 22 years we've never faced before, and we're hoping that we never have to face it again. We pray for everybody that's involved, and pray for the men and women that are in uniform, providing the services and working diligently right now at the jail to hold down the situation until the bureaucratic red tape could be resolved. Thank you very much, and everybody, God bless.